I have always been a light sleeper. My mother said it started the night my younger brother was born, when I was 4 years old and something woke me in the dark and I sat up and called for her and she was not there. She was in the next room, doing the most important work of her life, but I did not know that then. All I knew was that the house had changed while I was sleeping. And from that night, some part of me decided it would not be caught that way again. My husband, Emeka, found it funny in the early months of our marriage. He could sleep through a thunderstorm, through the neighbor's generator, through our baby's first cry, which I always heard before it became a real cry, before it had even fully decided to be a cry. He would wake up to find me already at the cot, and he would look at me with the face of a man who has married something he does not fully understand but is not troubled by. "You hear things that are not there," he told me once. "I hear things before they are loud enough for you," I told him. He laughed. He went back to sleep in the way only a man with a clean conscience can sleep, immediately, completely, without negotiation. I lay beside him and listened to the compound settle into night, the generator at the far end cutting off, the last voices fading, the particular silence that belongs to a place where people wake early and have earned their rest. I was not looking for anything. I want to be clear about that. I was simply awake, the way I'm always simply awake, with a baby on my chest who had fed and gone still and was now the warm, heavy, completely trusting weight that I had not known before she came was the most settling thing in the world. That was when I heard it. Not a frightening sound. That is what I need you to understand. Nothing about that first night felt frightening. It was just a sound that did not belong to the hour, a soft, rhythmic brushing. Patient, unhurried, the sound of a broom on red earth. I shifted the baby carefully to the mat. I went to the window. I moved the curtain just enough. Mama Chidima was in her yard. She was sweeping, a broom in both hands, moving it across the same small patch of ground near the base of the compound wall. Slow circles, again and again. Her head slightly bowed, her back curved with the effort of it, the way you curve when you are pressing something down rather than lifting something up. I stood there for a moment, then I let the curtain fall. I went back to my mat, I picked up my baby. I told myself that Mama Chidima was a woman who sometimes could not sleep, and that a woman who could not sleep had every right to sweep her own yard at whatever hour her body chose. I believed this. I believed it for 11 days, until the night I counted, the 11th night in a row. Same hour, same corner, same slow, deliberate circles. And I understood, standing at that window with my baby asleep against my shoulder and my husband breathing his uncomplicated sleep behind me, that what I was watching was not a woman who could not sleep. It was a woman who had something to do. Something that could only be done at that hour, in that corner, with no one watching, except me. I should have stayed at my window and done nothing. I should have gone back to my mat and let the night close over what I had seen, the way it closes over everything eventually. I did not. Let us go back to where this story truly begins. But before I do, please subscribe, like, and share this video with someone who loves a good story. Tell me in the comments which part of the world my wonderful Rooted Stories family is watching from tonight. Now make yourself comfortable. This is going to take a while. My name is Adaeze. I am 26 years old. I came to this compound 7 months ago as a new wife, carrying 2 bags and a box of kitchen things my mother had packed herself, checking each item twice before she put it in, the way she did everything, thoroughly, without rushing, as though the care you put into the beginning of a thing determines how the whole thing goes. I think about that now, the care she put into that box, as though she knew, without knowing she knew, that I would need everything inside it. The compound is in Oguta, in the part of town where the streets have names that nobody uses because everyone navigates by landmarks instead. Turn at the mango tree that was struck by lightning 3 years ago and is still somehow standing. past the woman who sells groundnut oil from her doorstep every Tuesday. When you see the compound with the orange door, you have gone too far. Come back 2 houses. That is how I learned to direct people here, that orange door. Mama Chidima's door. I will come back to that. In Mecca, my husband works at the motor spare parts shop on the main road. He leaves before the sun has fully decided to arise and comes home with engine oil on his hands and a tiredness that lives in his shoulders, the kind that doesn't fully leave even after a bath and food and sleep. He is not a complicated man. He does not say much, but what he says he means, and he has never once said something to me in the dark that he walked back in the daylight. I have decided in 7 months of learning him that this is rarer than people say it is. We were not wealthy. We were not struggling in the way that keeps you awake with fear. We were managing, the honest kind of managing, the kind where you know exactly how much is in the tin under the bed and you plan around it carefully. And sometimes there is a little more than you expected, and sometimes there is a little less. And both of these things you absorb without drama, because drama costs energy you need for other things. The baby came 6 weeks early. Her name is Chioma. She is 8 months old now, and she has my mother's forehead and Emeka's eyes, and a way of looking at things that is completely her own, a steadiness, a patience, as though she arrived in this world having already made her peace with it. She was not easy at the beginning. 6 weeks early means 6 weeks of weight she had not yet finished making, 6 weeks of a body still learning to do things bodies are supposed to do without effort. The first month I barely slept. I measured her breathing by listening for it, waking every time the rhythm changed, which was often, which meant I was always nearly awake even when I was asleep. That was how I became the kind of woman who hears everything, and that was how I came to hear the sweeping. But I am ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the compound first. Let me tell you about the people inside it, because the place where a thing happens is part of the thing, and you cannot understand what I eventually saw without first understanding what I thought I lived inside. Papa Obiora owned the compound. He was 73 and moved through his days with the certainty of a man who had outlived enough trouble to stop being hurried by new trouble. Every morning he sat outside his door in a low wooden chair with something hot in a cup and watched the compound begin its day. He did not interfere in other people's business, but his presence organized the space anyway, the way a large tree organizes the ground around it simply by being there. The couple near the gate, Ithani and his wife Ngozi, were always either laughing very loudly at something or not speaking at all, with nothing between those two states. Ngozi sold akara at the junction from 5 every morning. She was the kind of woman who moved fast and spoke fast and decided fast and was usually right and knew she was usually right and had no patience for the kind of discussion that already had an obvious answer. The large family in the biggest room, the Okereke family, had 5 children in a range of sizes that made me think they had been attempting to fill the room completely, one child at a time. They were loud in the comfortable way of people who have never had to be quiet for long. The children came in and out of everyone's compound without knocking because no one had ever told them they needed to. And then there was Mama Chidima. She was the first person I am telling you about, but the last person I have placed in this account, and there is a reason for that. Some people, when you try to describe them to someone who does not know them, resist simple description. They are not complicated in the way that makes a person difficult. They are complicated in the way that makes a person real. She was perhaps 60, small, the way of women who have spent a life carrying heavy things and have become efficient about it. Her hair was always covered. Her hands were rough at the knuckles but warm when they touched you, genuinely warm, the kind of warmth that does not come from effort but from nature. She had a goat she called by a name I could never catch clearly. She had a small garden of uziza and utazi along the compound wall that she tended with a seriousness she did not bring to many other things. She had lived in that house with the orange door longer than anyone else in the compound, longer than the couple near the gate, longer than the Okereke family, longer, I suspect, than Papa Obiora could clearly remember, though he would not admit this. When I arrived 7 months ago, she was the one who showed me which tap had better pressure in the morning and which market woman sold fresh tomatoes on which days. She was the one who told me gently and without making me feel foolish which matters in this compound went to Papa Obiora and which were better settled quietly between women. She did all of this without being asked, without making it feel like teaching, the way a woman guides another woman into a new life when she remembers what it felt like to be new. When Chioma came early and Emeka was not yet home, and I knocked on her door at 2 in the morning with a pain that had arrived faster than anyone had prepared me for, she opened the door as though she had been standing on the other side of it already. She came out with her wrapper still tied from sleep. She did not ask a single question that was not useful. She stayed until morning, until Emeka arrived and the baby was sleeping and my eyes were finally closing. At the door she stopped, she turned, she looked at me and said, "You did well." 3 words, plain and quiet, the way she said everything she meant. I loved her from that moment in the way you love someone who has seen you at your most open and did not look away. That was the woman I believed I knew. I want you to hold that, the woman who opened her door without hesitation at 2 in the morning, the woman who stayed, the woman who said 3 words and meant all of them. Hold it, because everything that came after, every night at the window, every doubt, everything I eventually had to decide, happened against that, against what I knew of her, against what I believed. And the believing, it turns out, was the most important thing. The thing about living in a compound is that your life is never fully your own. Not in a bad way. I want to be clear about that. When I was growing up in my mother's house, which was a single-family house on a quiet street, I used to think that privacy was something everyone had as a matter of course, like air or water. You did not think about it because it was simply there. A compound teaches you differently. In a compound, your morning begins in public. The moment you open your door, you have entered a shared world. Someone sees you. Someone notes the time. Someone registers whether you are wearing the same wrapper as yesterday, whether your fire started late, whether your baby was crying in the night, and for how long. None of this is done with hostility. It is simply the texture of a life lived in close quarters, the way a village has always lived, the way my grandmother's people lived, the way the compound holds its people together without asking their permission. I had been adjusting to this for 7 months. I was still adjusting. "Your baby slept well last night." Ngozi said this to me one Tuesday morning at the borehole, not as a question. She was filling her own can with the efficiency of a woman who had been doing this since before I was born and had reduced the motion to its absolute minimum. "It did," I said, "for once." "You look rested." She glanced at me briefly. "Rested is good. Enjoy it. The teeth will come soon, and then rested will become a memory." She said this with the matter-of-fact cheerfulness of a woman delivering information rather than offering comfort. I had learned to receive it that way. Mama Nkechi appeared at the borehole path with her own can, slightly later than her usual time. I had begun, without meaning to learn everyone's usual time. "Emeka left early this morning," she said to me by way of greeting. "He had a delivery to help with," I said. She nodded as though I had confirmed something she had already suspected. This was her way. The question and the answer existed mainly to formalize what she had already observed. The conversation was really about something else, about the quiet acknowledgement that she saw, and I knew she saw, and we were both comfortable with this arrangement. I did not mind Mama Nkechi. I want to say that plainly. Some of the younger women in other compounds spoke about women like her with a tiredness that verged on contempt, as though noticing things about your neighbors was a moral failure. I did not see it that way. My mother had a saying, a compound where nobody watches is a compound where anything can happen. There was a version of Mama Nkechi's attentiveness that was care. That was the version I chose to receive. Chioma was on my back, tied with the long cloth my mother had sent from home, sleeping in the boneless way of babies who had decided the world is safe enough for complete surrender. The weight of her was a thing I had stopped noticing, except in the moments when I noticed everything, when the morning was particularly still, or the light was the right kind of gold, or a song I knew came from somewhere across the yard. Those were the moments I thought about my mother, about the house I had come from, about the single-family house on a quiet street where I had grown up believing privacy was simply there, like air, like water. I thought about her more than I had expected. Marriage does that, I think. It makes you understand your mother in ways that explanation never could. That morning, on my way back from the borehole, I stopped at Mama Chidina's orange door the way I usually did. She was inside. I could hear the low sound of her radio. She kept it tuned to a station that played old highlife music in the mornings, the kind my own grandmother liked, slow and warm, and slightly melancholy in a way that felt good rather than sad. I knocked twice in the way I had learned she preferred, 2 quick knocks, not too hard, and waited. She opened the door with a wrapper neatly tied and a look on her face that shifted into warmth when she saw it was me. This shift, this small change in the face when she saw who was knocking, meant I was expected. It meant I was welcome. It meant that in this compound where my life was lived partially in public, there was one door where I was simply, uncomplicated, wanted. Adaeze. She said my name the way my mother said it, not shortened, not adjusted, the full thing. Good morning, Mama. I shifted Chioma on my back. I'm going to the market later. Do you need anything? She considered this with the seriousness she brought to small questions, as though the answer mattered and deserved to be gotten right. Crayfish, the small, dry kind, not the ground, and if the Uziza woman is there, the one with the red umbrella, ask her for the bunches from the back. She keeps the fresher ones behind. I know that woman, I said. She tried to give me the yellow ones last time. Mama Chidina made a sound that was almost a laugh. She tries that with everyone once, she said. After the first time, she knows better. I smiled. I told her I would bring the crayfish before evening. She told me there was no hurry. I adjusted Chioma on my back and walked toward my own door. That afternoon, I went to the market. The market in Oguta on a Tuesday was a particular kind of organized chaos that I had come to love in the way you love things that initially overwhelmed you. The tomato women, the cloth sellers, the man with the radio repair stand who was always surrounded by the most unlikely collection of machines in various stages of resurrection, the smell of stockfish and fresh pepper, and the particular sweetness of overripe plantain mixing with petrol from the bikes weaving through. I bought what I needed. I found the Uziza woman with the red umbrella and asked for the bunches from the back, the way Mama Chidina had told me. The woman looked at me for a moment, then reached behind without argument and produced 3 bunches that were visibly greener, more alive. How did you know to ask? The woman said. I taught someone, I said. I bought the small dry crayfish, not the ground. I bought extra tornadoes because they were good that day. I bought a small packet of chin-chin from a girl who could not have been more than 10, who was selling from a tray on her head with the focus of someone running a serious enterprise, because it reminded me of myself at that age, and the chin-chin smelled exactly right. I walked home through the afternoon heat with my bags and my baby, past the mango tree that was struck by lightning and is still somehow standing, past the groundnut oil woman's doorstep, past 2 houses beyond the orange door. That evening I cooked. I sent Chioma's portion of the soup to cool in the small bowl by the window, the way I always did, tasting it twice to make sure the pepper was not too much for her, which it never was because I cooked it carefully, which Emeka said was the sign of a woman who took her responsibilities seriously, and which I said was simply the sign of a woman who had tasted food that was too peppery for a baby and did not wish to repeat the experience. He laughed. He always laughed when I said the practical version of something he had said the sentimental version of first. I think he found it a comfort, the way some people find it a comfort to be known. I sent a portion of the soup to Mama Chidinma, too, in the enamel bowl I kept for her. She always returned it clean and quickly, which I had come to understand was her way of saying the food was good. She did not give compliments easily. A clean, returned bowl was what she offered instead, and I had learned to receive it as exactly that. By 9 o'clock, the compound was quiet. By 10, it was fully still. Emeka slept. Chioma slept. I lay on my side and listened to the dark and felt the particular peace of a day that had been ordinary in all the right ways, useful, warm, full of the small human transactions that make a life feel inhabited rather than just lived. I thought about my mother, about the crayfish in the bag, about the Uziza woman and the fresh bunches from the back. I thought, briefly, about nothing at all. Then I slept. I did not know, lying there in that ordinary peace, that 3 nights later I would be at my window, that I would begin counting, that the counting would change everything. The 3rd night was the night I started counting. Not because I planned to. I did not sit down and decide that I would keep a record. It happened the way most important decisions happen, quietly, without announcement, in the middle of something else. I was feeding Chioma. 2 in the morning, maybe a little past. The compound was the kind of quiet that has texture to it, the quiet of a place where everyone has finally, fully let go of the day. Emeka was on his back with one arm across his eyes, the way he always slept when he was deeply under. The generator at the far end had been off for hours. I heard it. The same sound, soft, rhythmic, patient. I did not go to the window immediately. I sat on the edge of the mat and finished feeding Chioma and told myself I was not going to look. I told myself that what I had seen the first 2 nights was a woman who had trouble sleeping and that my watching it was the strange thing, not the sweeping itself. I told myself this clearly and firmly. Then I put Chioma down and went to the window. Mama Chidinma was there. Same corner, same slow circles, same patient, deliberate press of the broom into the earth. Her back curved forward the way it curved, her wrapper catching a little of the moonlight, her face turned down toward the ground. I stood at the curtain and I watched and I counted. 43 circles. Camera pushes in. On broom, on earth, moonlight, the old woman's hands. I know because I counted them. I do not know why I counted. The number arrived in my mind before I had decided to keep it. 43 slow circles over the same small patch of ground, and then she stopped. She stood still for a moment, looking down at what she had done. Then she walked back to her orange door and went inside, and the compound was empty again, and the only sound was the cricket and Emeka's slow breathing. I let the curtain fall. I went back to my mat. 43. I lay in the dark and I thought about it the way you think about a word you have said so many times it has started sounding strange. What was 43 circles? What did 43 circles accomplish that 42 did not? What was she pressing into that corner of the earth that needed to be pressed in that carefully, that repeatedly, at that hour? I told myself I was a woman with too much time in the night and too little sleep, and my mind was doing what tired minds do, finding patterns in things that had no pattern, finding meaning in things that had no meaning. I went to sleep, eventually. In the morning, I looked at the corner of Mama Chidinma's yard from my doorway. The ground was smooth, undisturbed, the same red earth as the rest of the compound, the same texture, nothing to suggest that anything had been pressed into it 43 times the night before. Chioma was on my back. I adjusted her weight and looked at that corner of the yard and felt something I did not have a name for. Not fear, not quite, something quieter than fear and more persistent, the way a small stone feels in your sandal, not enough to stop you walking, but present with every step. I went to the market, I cooked, I sent soup to Mama Chidinma's door. The bowl came back clean. Everything was ordinary. Everything was the same. The fourth night I did not wait to hear it. I was awake before 2, Chioma not even stirring, and I lay in the dark and I listened for it, and when it came I was already at the window before I had decided to go. 41 circles. The 5th night, I was ashamed of myself by the 5th night, standing at a window in the dark counting an old woman's broom strokes like a woman with nothing better to do with her mind. The 5th night I told myself firmly that I would not look. I looked. 38 circles, and then something different. When she finished, she did not go straight inside. She stood over the corner of the yard and reached into the front of her wrapper and took something out, something small, something I could not see clearly from where I was standing. She held it in both hands for a moment, just a moment, her head bowed over it, her lips moving. Then she bent down slowly and pressed it into the earth with both palms flat on the ground. I stopped breathing. She stayed like that for what felt like a long time, her palms on the earth, her head bowed, her lips moving. Then she stood, she straightened her wrapper, she walked to her orange door and went inside. I stood at the window long after she was gone. My hands were on the curtain, and they were not shaking, but they were not completely still either. I thought about what her hands had looked like, rough at the knuckles, warm when they touched you, warm when she held my face and said 3 words that settled into me like warmth entering a cold room. I thought about those same hands pressed flat into the earth in the middle of the night. I told myself there were explanations, a woman from a village upbringing, keeping old rituals she had been taught without questioning, a prayer pressed into the ground the way her grandmother did and her grandmother before that, something for the garden, something for the goat. I told myself many things. I went back to my mat. I lay down. I closed my eyes. But here is the thing I could not tell myself away. The thing that stayed after all the reasonable explanations had been tried and found wanting. Mama Chidinma did not have anything planted in that corner of the yard. The uziza grew along the wall on the other side. The utazi was by the step. That corner, the corner where the broom moved, where her palms had pressed flat into the earth, had nothing growing in it. Had never had anything growing in it as far as I could remember. It was just ground, bare, ordinary red ground. What do you press into bare ground at 2 in the morning? What do you press in and press down and return to again and again across 5 nights running? What is it that needs to go that deep? I did not tell Emeka. I thought about it, lying beside him in the dark, watching the ceiling. I turned the words over in my mind, trying to find the shape of a sentence that would contain what I had seen without making me sound like a woman who had lost her judgment. I could not find that sentence. I did not tell anyone. I carried it alone into the 6th day and the 7th, and I smiled at Mama Chidinma over the compound wall the way I always had, and she smiled back the way she always had, warm and unhurried, and I brought her crayfish, and she returned the bowl clean. And every night I went to the window, and every night she was there. 11 nights. I counted 11 nights before I made a mistake. The mistake was not going to the window. I had already decided by that point that the window was something I could not help. The mistake was going outside. I did not plan it. That is the truth, and I want to say it plainly because what I did that night was not the action of a careful woman. And I am a careful woman. I have always been a careful woman. I measure things before I pour them. I read a path before I walk it. I do not act before I have thought, and I do not think out loud in places where thinking out loud costs you something. But the 12th night was different. Chioma had slept through, Emeka had slept through. The compound was so still it felt like the whole world had agreed to pause, and I was the only one who had not received the message. I had been awake since 1, not restless, awake, clear-eyed and alert the way you are sometimes in the deep night when your body has finished resting, but the dark has not yet finished. I heard the door at 2. The soft sound of her latch, the particular creak of the orange door that I now knew as well as the sound of my own gate. I went to the window. She was already in the yard, broom in hand, moving toward the corner. And something in me, something I could not name and cannot fully explain even now, simply moved. I put on my slippers. I tied my wrapper loosely. I told myself I was only going to the door. Just the door, just to hear better, just to see better, just to understand once and for all what the thing was that she pressed into the ground on the 5th night, the thing I had not been able to see clearly from the window. Just that, nothing more. I opened my door. The night air was warm and still. The moonlight was stronger than I had realized from behind the curtain, bright enough to see clearly, bright enough to be seen. I understood this the moment I stepped outside and felt exposed in a way that the window had not prepared me for. I pressed myself against the wall of my own house. The compound yard was perhaps 10 steps wide between my door and the low wall that separated my side from Mama Chidimma's. From where I stood, I could see her clearly. She was already in the circles. Slow, patient, the same deliberate press of the broom. Her head bowed, her lips, I could see now from here what I had not been sure of from the window. Her lips were moving, not loudly, not in any voice I could hear, a silent moving, the way people move their lips when they are saying something they have said so many times it no longer needs sound. I stood there, I do not know how long enough for my eyes to adjust fully to the moonlight, long enough to see the corner of the yard clearly, the bare red earth, the particular smoothness of it, the way it looked different from the rest of the compound ground, flatter somehow, more settled, the way ground looks when it has been attended to. Long enough to see, when she reached into her wrapper this time, what she took out. It was a small clay pot, sealed at the top with something dark. I could not tell what from where I stood. No bigger than her closed fist. She held it in both hands the way I had seen before, her head bowed over it, her lips moving. Then she knelt down, slowly, with the careful effort of an older woman's knees, and she pressed it into the earth at the base of the wall. Not placed, pressed, with both palms, pushing it down. Then she swept over it. A single beat of silence. The broom covered the spot completely. Smooth, even, nothing to see. She began to rise and I moved. I do not know what I was thinking. I was not thinking. My body simply decided that it did not want to be found standing flat against a wall in the middle of the night, watching my neighbor bury things, and it moved before my mind had a chance to approve the decision. I stepped back toward my door. My slipper caught the edge of the step. The sound was small, a scrape, nothing more. But the compound at 2 in the morning is not a place where small sounds go unheard. She turned. I was inside my door before she had completed the turn. I know this because I heard the rest of it from behind the wood. The stillness, the long pause, the sound of her standing in the yard and listening. I stood with my back against my own door and I did not breathe. 1 minute, perhaps 2. Then the soft sound of her feet crossing back to her house, the creak of the orange door, the latch. Silence. I stood against my door for a long time after. My heart was not beating fast. That surprised me. I had expected fast. What I felt instead was something slower and colder, the particular feeling of a woman who has just understood that she is involved in something whether she chose to be or not. I had seen her, and she had heard me. She did not know it was me. I believed that. I had been inside before she turned, but she knew someone had been there. She had stood in the yard and listened for something, and the something she was listening for was whether whoever had made that sound was still watching. I went back to my mat. I lay down. I did not sleep. In the morning, I opened my door, and the compound was the same compound it had always been. Papa Obiora in his chair, the Okedeke children already running, Ngozi's gate already shut, she long gone to the Akara Junction. Mama Chidima's orange door was closed. This was not unusual. Her door was often closed in the mornings until she had finished her prayers. I knew this. I had always known this. But that morning, I stood in my doorway and looked at the closed orange door and felt the difference between knowing a thing and seeing it with new eyes. I went to the borehole. I came back. I fed Chioma. I started my fire. At mid-morning, the orange door opened. Mama Chidima came out with her small garden trowel, the way she did every few days, moving toward the uziza along the wall. I watched her from my doorway. She moved the way she always moved, unhurried, efficient, the slight forward bend of a woman who has carried things a long time. She had not seen me yet. I told myself to go inside, to leave it, to let the morning be ordinary. I stepped into the yard. "Good morning, Mama." She looked up. The shift in her face when she saw me, that familiar warm shift, the one I had come to rely on, came. But it came a half-second late. I noticed the half-second. I do not think I would have noticed it before the previous night, but I had spent 11 nights at a window learning to watch her, and I noticed. "Adaeze," my name full and warm. "Good morning. How is Chioma?" "She is well," I said. "She slept through." "Good." She looked at me for a moment. Something moved behind her eyes, quick, like a shadow crossing water. Then she smiled. "You look tired." "I did not sleep well," I said. This was true. It was also a test. I did not plan it as a test, but I felt it become one as the words left my mouth. Nodded, unsurprised. "The heat," she said. "It has been bad this week. Even I was restless last night." Restless. She had said it easily, naturally, the way you say a true thing that costs you nothing. And perhaps it was exactly that, a true thing, a woman who could not sleep, nothing more. But I heard it differently now. I heard it the way you hear a word from someone when you already know something about their night they do not know you know. Restless. "Yes," I said. "The heat." She looked at me a moment longer. Then she turned back to her garden. I went inside. I sat on the low stool near the window and I held Chioma against my chest and I looked at the floor and I thought. She had looked at me and she had not seen a woman who knew anything, or she had looked at me and seen exactly that and decided to say nothing. I did not know which, and not knowing, sitting with two completely different truths and being unable to choose between them was worse than knowing the bad one. I thought about the clay pot. Small, sealed, pressed into the ground with both palms. I thought about her lips moving in the moonlight. I thought about 3 years of pepper soup and market wisdom and the warmth of hands that did not feel rough when they touched you. And I thought about the corner of her yard. There, nothing planted, nothing growing. Ground that had been attended to in the dark for 11 nights and showed nothing in the daylight except its own smoothness. Some things, my mother used to say, are buried because they are finished, and some things are buried because they are not finished yet. Sound fades, compound settling into afternoon, Adaeze still on her stool, Chioma asleep in her arms, the orange door visible through the window. I sat there for a long time. I did not go back to the window that night. The night after, I did. It was Mama Nkechi who said it first. Of course it was. I had been at the borehole 3 minutes when she arrived. She came with her can in her particular posture, shoulders slightly forward, chin slightly up, the posture of a woman carrying information she has been waiting to deposit in the right place. I recognized it by now. I had learned her rhythms the way I had learned everyone else's rhythms in this compound. The way you learn things you did not set out to learn, simply by living close to them. She greeted me. I greeted her. We filled our cans. Then she said, without looking at me directly, in the voice she used when she was saying something important while appearing to say something ordinary, "Did you hear anything last night?" I kept my hands on my jerry can. "Hear what?" "In the compound." She paused. Let the pause do some work. "My husband said he heard something, around 2, a sound from the yard." I thought about my slipper on the step, the scrape, the small sound I had made 12 nights ago that I believed until this moment had been swallowed by the dark and forgotten. "I did not hear anything," I said. This was not a lie. That particular night, I had been inside before anything could be heard. I told myself this carefully, and it held. Mama Nkechi nodded slowly. She said he probably said it was an animal. She did not sound convinced that her husband had said this. But you know how I am. Once I hear a thing, I cannot leave it. "I know," I said. She looked at me then, directly, the way she looked at things she wanted to see clearly. I held her gaze and kept my face at the temperature of mild interest, nothing more. "That woman keeps strange hours," she said, quietly, not loud enough to carry. I did not ask which woman. I knew which woman, and she knew I knew. "Some people do not sleep well," I said. She picked up her can. She looked at me for one more moment, the look of a woman who suspects she is being given less than is available and cannot prove it. Then she went back up the path. I thought about it all morning. Mama Nkechi's husband had heard something, which meant the night I had gone out, the 12th night, the scrape of my slipper, had not passed as quietly as I had believed. Or he had heard something on another night, something that I had not made, something that had nothing to do with me. That second possibility sat in my stomach the way a thing sits when you do not want to examine it closely. I pounded pepper. I washed Chioma's small clothes and hung them along the line. I swept my own compound, my sweeping, in the daytime, quick, practical, nothing like what I had been watching across the wall. And I thought about what Mama Nkechi had said, and what she had meant, and what she had been deciding in her careful, methodical way to do about it. 3 days later, she did it. I was not there for the beginning of it. I came back from the market to find Ngozi outside her gate with her arms folded and her face arranged in the expression she wore when something had happened that she had opinions about. I slowed when I saw her. "What is it?" I said. She looked at me. She looked at Mama Chidima's orange door, closed as usual at this hour, then back at me. "Mama Nkechi spoke to Papa Obiora this morning," she said, quietly, quickly, the way Ngozi delivered things she wanted to deliver before the moment closed. "About the nighttime movements. She said it has been going on for weeks. She said her husband had heard something. She said she herself heard something last week." I set my market bag down slowly. "What did Papa Obiora say?" I asked. "He listened." Ngozi's mouth pressed together briefly. "He said he would think on it. You know how he is." I knew how he was. He did not move fast. He did not react. He sat with things the way he sat in his chair, completely, without urgency, letting the weight of a matter distribute itself properly before he decided anything. "Has anyone spoken to her? To Mama Chidima directly?" Ngozi looked at me. Something in my voice, perhaps, some quality that made her pay attention. "No," she said, "not yet." I picked up my bag. I went inside. I sat with Chioma on the mat and I thought about what was happening and what was going to happen and the shape the thing was taking in the compound without my help or my interference, simply by following the logic of how compounds work. Mama Nkechi had heard something. She had gone to Papa Obiora. Papa Obiora was sitting with it. Ngozi was watching. The Okereke family would hear by evening. By tomorrow, the compound would have a story. And once a compound has a story, it tells that story with a confidence that makes It looked like earth. Just earth, smooth as I had noticed before and slightly darker in one spot near the base of the wall, the darkness of ground that has been pressed and attended to, but nothing visible, nothing that explained itself. Whatever was in there completely, taken in, covered over, given back the face of ordinary ground. I reached out and pressed my fingers into the soil. It was cool. Much cooler than the earth around it, cool in a way that had nothing to do with the morning shade. I pulled my hand back. I stood up. I heard her behind me before she spoke. Not her footstep. She moved too quietly for that. I heard the change in the air, the way it shifted slightly when she arrived, the way it always had, the way I had always found comforting. I turned around. Mama Chidinma was standing at her door, her small can in one hand, her eyes on me. Not on the corner, on me. We looked at each other across her yard. The morning noise of the compound continued around us as though nothing was happening, as though two women were simply standing in a yard at mid-morning with nothing particular between them. Her face was still, completely still, not cold, not angry, just waiting, the way she waited for things, fully, without urgency, as though she had long ago made her peace with however they resolved. I opened my mouth. I had no sentence prepared. The words came by themselves, the way they do when something has been kept too long and finally finds its opening. "Mama," I said, "what is in the ground?" A silence. Long. Full, the kind that has weight in it. She looked at me for a long time. Her face did not change, but something moved behind her eyes, deep, slow, like something large shifting its position in dark water. Then she said quietly, "Come inside." And she turned and walked through the orange door. I stood in her yard for a moment. The compound morning moved around me, children pounding, the radio from the Okereke side, everything ordinary, everything unchanged. I looked at the corner, I looked at the orange door, and I followed her inside. Her room was the same room it had always been. I need to say that first because when you are about to be told something that reorganizes everything, the ordinary details of a place become important in a way they were not before. You hold them, you count them, you use them to remind yourself that the ground beneath you is still ground. One window, the light coming through it in a single column, warm and dusty, a low wooden bed with a wrapper folded precisely at the foot, a small table with a kerosene lamp and a tin cup, and a Bible whose spine had been broken and repaired and broken again from use. A photograph on the wall, a younger woman, perhaps 30, standing in front of a house with an orange door, holding a baby, squinting slightly into the sun. The High Life station on the radio still playing, low enough to be underneath the silence rather than filling it. A stool near the window. She pointed at it. I sat. She sat on the edge of the bed and put her can on the floor beside her and folded her hands in her lap and looked at me, not with the look of a woman who had been caught, with the look of a woman who had been waiting for this conversation and was now deciding where to begin it. "How long have you been watching?" she said. Not an accusation, a question asked the way you ask for information you need in order to proceed. 11 nights, I said, before last night. She nodded, once, as though this confirmed something. You came outside, she said, the 12th night. I did not deny it. Yes. She heard you, she said, without accusation, without anything in her voice except the fact itself. I did not know it was you, not then. When did you know? The next morning. She looked at me steadily. When you said you had not slept well, the way you said it. I thought about my own face that morning, the careful temperature I had held it at, the mild interest I had performed. She had seen through it completely. "Why did you not say something?" I asked. "She was deciding," she said, "what to tell you." She paused. "And whether." The radio played something slow and warm underneath the silence between us. Outside, the compound continued its mourning. A child called for someone. A gate swung. "Mama," I said, "what is in the ground?" She looked at her hands in her lap. She looked at them for a long moment, the way you look at things that have done work you are still accounting for. Then she began. Her name, her full name, the name she had been born with in a village 2 hours from here, was Chidinma Okafor. She was 61 years old. She had lived in this compound for 22 years, which was longer than Papa Obiora's clear memory and longer than any other household inside these walls. She had not always lived alone. Her husband, Ikechukwu, had died 14 years ago, a sickness that arrived quickly and left no room for preparation. He was a quiet man, she said, a man who repaired things without being asked and remembered without being reminded, good to her in the private way, the way that makes no noise. They had one child, a daughter, Adora. That was her name. In the photograph on the wall, the younger woman with the orange door and the baby and the squint against the sun. Adora married at 24, a man from a good family, people said, a man with a business, people said, a man who came with the right things and said the right things and whose people sat with her people and agreed on everything that needed to be agreed upon. Mama Chidinma had believed them. She had sat in that room during the negotiations and listened and believed because she wanted to believe, and because wanting to believe is its own kind of blindness. She stopped. She looked at the window. "He was not what they said he was," she said. She said it quietly, simply, the way you say a thing you have said to yourself so many times it is worn smooth. "What happened?" I asked. My voice came out very small. What happened was not quick. That was the first thing she wanted me to understand. It was not one thing. It was a slow accumulation, the way compound damage happens. Not a wall falling, but the water getting in at one small place and working through the structure over years. And by the time you see it, the damage has been done for a long time already. He controlled the money, then the movement, then the visits from her family, then the letters, then the telephone calls, then Adora herself, her way of speaking, her way of sitting, the way she held her face when other people were watching. Mama Chidinma traveled to see her daughter 3 times in the first 2 years. Each time she arrived, something was slightly different, slightly smaller, slightly more careful, the way a person becomes smaller when the space they're living in has been quietly, steadily reduced. The 3rd visit, Adora met her at the gate. She held her mother's hands and she said, quickly and quietly before they went inside, "Mama, do not say anything to him today. Whatever he says, just agree. Just agree." She came home from that visit and she sat in this room, on this bed, with her hands in her lap like this, and she thought about what a mother does when her child is living inside something that is eating her alive and the doors are all locked from the inside. She went to the family, his people. She had sat before his uncle and his brothers, and she had spoken plainly. They had listened politely. They had explained patiently that what she was describing was a wife who did not understand how to manage a man of his standing, that Adora was well provided for, that her complaints, if she had them, should be brought to her husband directly. She had gone to the church. The pastor prayed with her and told her that a good wife did not bring her husband's name into the street. She had gone to the police. The officer wrote something in a notebook and told her that family matters were family matters. Door after door after door, closed or clothing, each one politely and firmly shut. And so she came home, to this room, to this compound, to the only thing she had left that she knew how to use. What her own mother had taught her, what her grandmother had taught her mother, what lived in the oldest layer of her, beneath the church and the police and the family meetings and all the modern structures that had been built over it without replacing it. She reached into that layer. She began. I sat on the low stool and I listened to all of this, and I felt something moving through me that was not simple, not one thing. It was grief and recognition and something closer to fear than I wanted to name, and underneath it all, underneath everything, a question forming that I had not yet found the courage to ask out loud. I asked it, "What are you putting in the ground, Mama?" She looked at me. "Protection," she said. A silence. "For a daughter," she said, "to weaken what he has built around her, to open a door where there is no door." She paused. "It takes time. It must be renewed, every night at the right hour with the right—" I have always been a light sleeper. My mother said it started the night my younger brother was born, when I was 4 years old and something woke me in the dark and I sat up and called for her and she was not there. She was in the next room, doing the most important work of her life, but I did not know that then. All I knew was that the house had changed while I was sleeping. And from that night, some part of me decided it would not be caught that way again. My husband, Emeka, found it funny in the early months of our marriage. He could sleep through a thunderstorm, through the neighbor's generator, through our baby's first cry, which I always heard before it became a real cry, before it had even fully decided to be a cry. He would wake up to find me already at the cot, and he would look at me with the face of a man who has married something he does not fully understand but is not troubled by. "You hear things that are not there," he told me once. "I hear things before they are loud enough for you," I told him. He laughed. He went back to sleep in the way only a man with a clean conscience can sleep, immediately, completely, without negotiation. I lay beside him and listened to the compound settle into night, the generator at the far end cutting off, the last voices fading, the particular silence that belongs to a place where people wake early and have earned their rest. I was not looking for anything, I want to be clear about that. I was simply awake, the way I'm always simply awake, with a baby on my chest who had fed and gone still and was now the warm, heavy, completely trusting weight that I had not known before she came was the most settling thing in the world. That was when I heard it. Not a frightening sound. That is what I need you to understand. Nothing about that first night felt frightening. It was just a sound that did not belong to the hour. A soft, rhythmic brushing. Patient, unhurried. The sound of a broom on red earth. I shifted the baby carefully to the mat. I went to the window. I moved the curtain just enough. Mama Chidima was in her yard. She was sweeping, a broom in both hands, moving it across the same small patch of ground near the base of the compound wall. Slow circles, again and again. Her head slightly bowed, her back curved with the effort of it, the way you curve when you are pressing something down rather than lifting something up. I stood there for a moment, then I let the curtain fall. I went back to my mat, I picked up my baby. I told myself that Mama Chidima was a woman who sometimes could not sleep, and that a woman who could not sleep had every right to sweep her own yard at whatever hour her body chose. I believed this. I believed it for 11 days, until the night I counted, the 11th night in a row. Same hour, same corner, same slow, deliberate circles. And I understood, standing at that window with my baby asleep against my shoulder and my husband breathing his uncomplicated sleep behind me, that what I was watching was not a woman who could not sleep. It was a woman who had something to do, something that could only be done at that hour, in that corner, with no one watching, except me. I should have stayed at my window and done nothing. I should have gone back to my mat and let the night close over what I had seen, the way it closes over everything eventually. I did not. Let us go back to where this story truly begins. But before I do, please subscribe, like, and share this video with someone who loves a good story. Tell me in the comments which part of the world my wonderful Rooted Stories family is watching from tonight. Now make yourself comfortable. This is going to take a while. My name is Adaeze. I am 26 years old. I came to this compound 7 months ago as a new wife, carrying 2 bags and a box of kitchen things my mother had packed herself, checking each item twice before she put it in, the way she did everything, thoroughly, without rushing, as though the care you put into the beginning of a thing determines how the whole thing goes. I think about that now, the care she put into that box, as though she knew, without knowing she knew, that I would need everything inside it. The compound is in Oguta, in the part of town where the streets have names that nobody uses because everyone navigates by landmarks instead. Turn at the mango tree that was struck by lightning 3 years ago and is still somehow standing. Pass the woman who sells groundnut oil from her doorstep every Tuesday. When you see the compound with the orange door, you have gone too far. Come back 2 houses. That is how I learned to direct people here, that orange door. Mama Chidima's store. I will come back to that. Emeka, my husband, works at the motor spare parts shop on the main road. He leaves before the sun has fully decided to arise and comes home with engine oil on his hands and a tiredness that lives in his shoulders, the kind that doesn't fully leave even after a bath and food and sleep. He is not a complicated man. He does not say much, but what he says he means, and he has never once said something to me in the dark that he walked back in the daylight. I have decided in 7 months of learning him that this is rarer than people say it is. We were not wealthy. We were not struggling in the way that keeps you awake with fear. We were managing, the honest kind of managing, the kind where you know exactly how much is in the tin under the bed and you plan around it carefully. And sometimes there is a little more than you expected, and sometimes there is a little less. And both of these things you absorb without drama, because drama costs energy you need for other things. The baby came 6 weeks early. Her name is Chioma. She is 8 months old now, and she has my mother's forehead and Emeka's eyes, and a way of looking at things that is completely her own, a steadiness, a patience, as though she arrived in this world having already made her peace with it.